What's up again there, guys? Brian here, the Three Topics Gamer, here to give you another episode of my weekly Q&A tile of people's questions, where I answer a series of questions that were sent to me over the past week. And it just so happens that this episode is coming right before Christmas, so hope you guys will have an awesome Christmas. Now, for this particular episode, we definitely got a bunch more questions than last week's episode, so that's a good thing. There were a couple of questions that were in the comment section of the last video. I was able to answer theirs. Like always, if you don't hear your questions in this video and you haven't already gotten your notifications, then you'll know where to look. But like always, if you do happen to enjoy this video by the end, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Keep track of me in all my future episodes of people's questions, since I think there's like one more as well as a few more videos I have planned for the rest of the year. So starting off with the first question of the episode, coming from Night Slayer 666. You want to know, which one do I think is better in general? A remastered version of the game or a full remake? And why? I don't think either one is really better than the other. I think it's very much a case-by-case decision. For example, something like what happened with Shadow of the Colossus is more, I would consider that to be more of a remaster than a true remake. I mean, they claim that they like rebuilt that game from the ground up, but more or less it was like 99% the same game. They just updated the graphics, the control. I mean, any issues that were in the original game were in the remake. So I saw that as more of just an updated remaster. However, something like Resident Evil 2 Remake, in which that very much was a completely built to be a different game, but an updated version of an older game. So I think that there are some cases where, heck, you can take something that is old and just update the visuals, and it works just fine. Because I think the controls, the camera angles, the game mechanics, everything works just fine. You just want to make it look better for current gen consoles. And then there's older games that have older game mechanics that you don't think would work very well in current gen consoles, and you just want to update them for a modern audience. That works too. So personally, I think that a remaster and a remake can very much work depending on the game itself. So I'd say they're kind of even. Because trust me, I've definitely played some remakes that I didn't think were great, and some remasters that I didn't think were that great. But again, it depends on the specific game. You have to answer that by case narrative. Next question comes from Zack Taft, and you want to know, well, this was a weird question, but an old one. But so, what did I think of what they did with Jill Valentine in Resident Evil 5 when she was controlled by Wesker? Did you think it was strange or stupid? I didn't think it was strange or stupid at all. I was like, okay, Jill supposedly died, and you find out that she didn't die and was controlled by Wesker. That seems perfectly logical. If Jill happened to survive the fall and Wesker got her hands on her body, why wouldn't he experiment on her? I mean, you have to remember that Jill Valentine was not entirely normal. She still technically had the T virus in her body. I mean, that's a fact that a lot of people don't know about Jill. Is that Jill was infected with the virus from Nemesis, and even though Carlos was able to create an antidote for it, there were still elements of the T of that virus in her body. It just wouldn't mutate her. So that kind of, I believe in some cases, kind of granted Jill some extra physical traits and abilities that maybe she wasn't even aware of. So I think if Wesker had known about that, which I'm sure he would have, I think that would have been a good reason to keep her and experiment her and use her for an experiment, that's kind of what Wesker does. So I didn't think that was strange at all. What I do think is strange is that we haven't heard or seen Jill at all since Resident Evil 5, and I really think she's due for a return. So that's the only thing about Jill Valentine that I find strange. Next question comes from Super Samus Zack, and you want to know, what is the game that I've played that has tons of aspects that I both love and hate? A game that I love and hate. I guess one that comes off the top of my head is Mortal Kombat versus DC. I like the concept of crossing universes. I think that was great. I mean, Marvel versus Capcom did that so well. I thought the fighting was all right. I just thought how they kind of dumbed down. I understand you don't want to have fatalities with superheroes, but I'm like, I wish they had gone that far. I don't really think anyone would have had an issue with seeing Superman get his spinal cord ripped out, or Batman. Ooh, now that I think about it, yeah, that might have been pretty brutal. Yeah, yeah. I was like, eesh. Seeing superheroes go through Mortal Kombat style fatalities, ew, that would be pretty brutal. Yeah, I take back that last comment. Ooh. um, I just wish they. I wish they just done more with the fates with the brutal like heroic brutalities and some of the fatalities. I mean, even some of the fatalities from the Mortal Kombat characters were seriously watered down to the point where it was just kind of sad. So I think that's like the only thing about it that I didn't like. I mean, story wise, I thought it was fine. I like how there was an aspect where Darkseid and Shao Kahn came into like one enemy. I thought that was cool, and I like how they at least reference it in older games. Like I think if you play like I want to say Mortal Kombat either 10 or 11, they do reference Mortal Kombat versus DC. So there were at least some aspects of that that people did think were good. So I guess that's like the one game I can think of off the top of my head that I think has elements that I thought were both good and bad in that game. So I would go with Mortal Kombat versus DC. Next question comes from Alucerna, and you want to know, since you're such a big history buff, what is your favorite history topic to study about? I will study and love anything involving any time period between either before or during the Roman Empire, like before Rome became an empire, was a republic. So anything doing with ancient Rome or anything involving World War II. You give me just any of those, and I'm all for it. Those are definitely my two favorite periods of history that I love to study the most for multiple different reasons. Next question comes from Brady Burick. You want to know, personal question, why is Metal Gear Solid so beloved? I think I love it because it has an incredible story that expands a great series of games. It has fantastic characters that go to amount of character to growth. I love how it integrates real history into its own games. As far as I know, that's the only franchise that I know that actually does that. I like character interactions. I like character relationships. I love the action set pieces. I absolutely love the music. And Hideo Kojima is an absolutely brilliant storyteller. Maybe not so much when it came to Death Stranding. I mean, I could see where he was going with that. And it was definitely an interesting story in that case. I just think it took too long for the story to actually get going, and I think most people would not appreciate that. But the way he's able to tell stories is absolutely fascinating. And I like how earlier games were able to break the fourth barrier or be more self aware. It gives it a level of charm that just other franchises just cannot pull off. I mean, it goes in as probably being the most impressive cinematic game franchise in history. To the point where I don't think other franchises could really pull it off as well. I mean, how many other games could get away with an hour and a half long cutscene in Metal Gear Solid 4? If you tried that with any other game, you'd be crucified. But heck, because it's in Metal Gear Solid 4, and that series has been known for being so cinematic. I mean, you could honestly say that Metal Gear was really the first franchise I could think of that was really truly cinematic. I mean, if you go back, the first Metal Gear Solid 1 game on PlayStation had an element of storytelling that I don't really think any game during that period of time ever attempted that. I mean, I can't think of any game from the Nintendo Entertainment System to Super Nintendo to Sega Genesis to Sega Saturn to Nintendo 64. I can't think of any game that tried to have that many cutscenes or be that cinematic at that time. And that's really a staple of the franchise, that it's been that way throughout its entire run. So, that's one thing that I think for me helps it become so beloved, which is why it's, even though I think the franchise is dead and probably should still stay dead, and I really hope that someone buys the rights from Konami and just does their own version of Metal Gear, it still has remained my favorite video game franchise of all time. Next question comes from the Batman of Neo-Gotham, and you want to know, since 2021 is almost closed, what was my favorite and least favorite thing about this year and why? Definitely my least favorite thing about 2021 was working at my second job. I don't remember why. At the beginning I got a second job working at an arcade place. I thought I was going in there to do one thing. I ended up doing something that I wasn't really too comfortable with. And I didn't, and I think after maybe a month, I just kind of hated working there and I ended up quitting. I'm thankful for how long I lasted there. I thought I would last at least 6 months, so I was kind of upset that I only lasted maybe a month or two. However, I did manage to use that extra money to get a PlayStation 5, so I'm thankful for that. If I wasn't working there, I wouldn't have that, and pick up a few other things. But yeah, just working at that job was not a great experience when I go back and look at it. But definitely the high point of the year was definitely going to El Paso and getting to spend me and my brother's birthday together since I hadn't seen him in 3 years up to that point. So yeah, I think those are so basically working at my second job that I quit after a month would be like the low point of this year, and the high point was being able to go on my trip back in late August, early September. That would be the high point of my year. Next and last question of the episode comes from Red Guilty, and you want to know what is the longest video game I've ever played or ever beaten. I I can't I can make a guess of what that might be, but I can't be confirmed. I can't 100% confirm without looking it up. But it would probably have to be a JRPG. My best, I mean, off the top of my head, I want to say maybe Persona 5, maybe, because I know I put a minimum of 100 hours into that game. But then again, I typically like to do a lot of extra stuff when I play JRPGs, so I don't know. I really don't know exactly what game it is, but I know that without question it would have had to have been a JRPG. There's no other genre of games that I usually spend more hours into than JRPGs, whether it's a Pokemon game or a Final Fantasy game or a Ni no Kuni game or a Persona game. It's without question going to be a JRPG. So yeah, I think that's the best answer I can give you. So that'll about do it for this episode of the People's Questions. I want to thank everyone who happened to send in your questions right before Christmas. If you guys have any more questions you'd like me to answer in probably what might be the last episode of the year, I believe it will be sure to type your questions in the comments down below, but make sure you get to me roughly before next Wednesday, before noon, before I start filming the next episode. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you all next time.